What does a brand come down to? What are the main pieces that a business really needs to think about? Because I think a lot of times they just think it's a logo and it's a tagline. So Anthony, Greg, do you guys want to jump right in and just riff off each other? Let's talk about all the things that really encompasses a strong brand.
Yeah, I mean, branding is one of those things where, I mean, really, what is it, right? Different people have different explanations and expectations. And if the explanation of branding was simple, there wouldn't be so much ambiguity regarding the concept. There's a misconception for sure that a brand is a logo or a brand is some sort of visual representation, but it really is so much more than that. So your branding includes your customer service, your reputation, your social responsibility, of course, your visuals, all these elements and so many more work together to create a unique brand profile. I think the best way to consider a brand is like perceiving brands like we perceive people. So imagine you're in a room, you're at a networking event or a cocktail party or a bar or some, crowded public place. When someone walks in the door, the first thing you assess that person on is their appearance. Are they well groomed? How do they carry themselves? Right? Do they stand out in a good way? Do they stand out in a bad way? You're going to make that snap judgment and then you're going to move on. You're going to engage with that person. So you're going to start a conversation. So what are they saying, right? What's their message? What are their points of view? What's their tone and their personality? Right? Are they fun? Do they smile? Or are they serious and clinical? Are they kind of shooting from the hip? Are they well rehearsed? And then they're also going to bring a reputation into that room. So have you heard from other people that dealing with this person is unpleasant and not valuable? Have you heard that it's a great experience? And then from that, you have like a pretty limited, social capital, right? Do you want to spend your time and your attention on that person in the future? Well, that's kind of how we perceive brands, except the room is far more crowded and we're asking people to spend, their budget and do they want to be associated with that brand? So for me, that's a pretty good way to consider brands and really what goes into a brand.
That's great. Anything to add, Anthony? What are the things, the key components that people need to consider when they think about brand? Anything outside of what Greg said?
Yeah, I mean, I think Greg brought up a lot of valuable information, especially I think, top of mind is reputation, right? Whether it's, from a guerrilla marketing perspective, or if it's something that's like, consistent with your brand and what you are stating, right? From your mission statement to, how you are perceived, right? I think that's what's key, I think, from a brand, right? It doesn't necessarily always have to be that visual, like Greg was saying too. I think that's what's that a lot of people think, just creating something from a design perspective is not necessarily always the most important thing. It's like, what do people think about your brand when it's whether it's seen or it's heard, right? I think that's where it always comes into play. So just thinking about those components, it's not necessarily just a design.
Sure. One of the things that I learned from you guys that I repeat all the time to people now is a lot of times when people put a brand together or their brand message, they think of just specific key components like your value props and logo and tagline and things like that. One of the things that I find really fascinating that you guys do for clients is really defining and helping to give assets to promote both an internal and an external culture, to separate those two things to help attract and speak to the community while also speaking to those internal and potential employees, I think is so brilliant, but it's not something that we actively think about. Is there anything you want to add to that, or any other little pieces that we may be missing, not understanding the depths of branding?
I think when you're like auditing a brand too, I think it's like, how do they compare to others, right? Are they in line? Do they parallel, or do they compete, right? I think that's the other thing too, because it's like, you don't want to be so different, right, in the market that people don't know what your brand is either, right? Because you could look like something, but you're not necessarily looking like you should be within that market too. So it's figuring out, I think, that balance of how you set yourself apart from whether it's a message, whether it's the visual, and also the reputation, right? I think that those are key components. And, how do you, if you're doing a rebrand, how do you don't go so far left and stay within your lane, so to speak, right? But also kind of like also stand out too within the market.